Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Just Talking with myself, Stuart, and my colleague Amin. We've got a great episode lined up for you today as we're joined by a special guest, Chris Bryce, Chief Executive of the FCSA. Chris, welcome to Just Talking. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, Stuart. Good morning.
Morning.
Thanks very much for having me along today. I'm Chris. I am the CEO of FCSA, as you mentioned. FCSA is the leading accreditation body for the umbrella and limited company contractor market in the UK. And I've been with them just on 3 years now. Prior to that, I was with FCSA, and prior to that, I was actually a contractor for 20-something years. So a long time in the industry, one way or t'other.
Yeah, certainly got the experience there. Definitely. So today we thought we'd have a discussion, basically breaking down what came out in the spring statement, what it means, who it impacts, and the key takeaways that we need to know. We've come away with five main takeaways from that.
Yep.
HMRC looking at cracking down on tax evasion, introducing stricter tax avoidance penalties, four new consultations around compliance measures. One of the exciting ones for me is £600 million allocated to training 60,000 new construction workers, and then the increase of 2.5% of GDP by April 2027 for defence spendings. So, Chris, if we can ask you what your main thoughts are on the spring statement, and the flip side, if you were Chancellor of the Exchequer, what would you have done?
I've done differently.
Yeah,
Well, if I was Chancellor of the Exchequer, I probably wouldn't be starting from here. That's I guess my key takeaway. I suppose for us, the crackdown on tax evasion and the consultations that they've issued in that regard are really important. It's been a long time coming, but I'm actually quite pleased to see that government are taking seriously the role of well, let's be blunt about it, the schemesters and fraudsters
Yeah, of course.
who perpetrate and design these dodgy schemes. I think certainly there's a lot to chew on in the consultations they've issued. I think one key factor, which I'm quite pleased to see, but I'm struggling at this point to see how they're going to do it, is to perhaps take the cloak of secrecy away from all these King's Council opinions that these schemesters seem to get, and hold the KC responsible for it. I'm sure the Bar Council have got a few things to say about that. I think stricter tax avoidance penalties, and let's be clear here, when we're talking about tax avoidance, what they're really talking about is the schemes designed, often without any merit whatsoever, or usually without any merit whatsoever, to avoid paying PAYE taxes. And that really is borderline evasion rather than avoidance.
Yeah, it's not your Gary Barlow's anymore, is it? And your Jimmy Carr's.
Well, I mean, the various film investment schemes that came along, okay, so HMRC showed them to be unworkable. But there's actually schemes out there, and we see the adverts every day, 90% of your pay is take home, etc., etc. Lots of King's Council opinions attached to these, and not one of them works. And that's the key takeaway, is that governments seem to be going after the perpetrators for a change, rather than the victims, whether those victims be innocent or not, I can put it that way. I do think that those consultations, a lot of work for us to do, of course, and we'll be reaching out to JA and others to sort of get your views on them. But I think those consultations are going to be really useful to actually bring out what the underlying issues are with the industry. 60,000 new construction workers, £600 million. Excellent. That's really good. One of the things I would say is the CITB have been around for a long time. I know there's a real issue amongst some of the providers in that workspace in terms of the payment intermediaries around the CITB levy and how that's applied to them. And I would like to see sort of a bit of the small guys getting some of that CITB levy back, and rather than all the money going to the big players in that industry. But 60,000 new construction workers, which of course ties in with the government's stated aim to remove planning red tape, I think it can only be a good thing. And defence spending, well, if I was the Chancellor, I would have probably gone slightly higher. We seem to have lost our old best friends, and we need to either make new best friends or frankly beef up the defence sector. I think the defence sector has been ignored for far too long. You see that, people way more experienced than me, former chairs of joint chiefs, etc., have been calling for better defence spending for years. I think one of the great problems, of course, in defence spending is probably, maybe outside healthcare, the most expensive technology on the planet. What you get for your 2.5% of GDP, I'm not entirely sure. But we have to be, if not self-reliant, at least more capable of defending our country than we currently appear to be. Although, there may be many people who say that 2.5% is way too much, but I would disagree. If I was Chancellor, I would be really looking at workers' taxes. I would be saying to myself, well, isn't it about time that workers got a fair break from the tax system? And there's two peaks that we'll understand really well. That peak around the upper earnings limit, which puts you all of a sudden into 40% tax bracket, and then the peak between 1,000 and 128,000 a year, which is a cliff edge. It's not a peak, it's a cliff edge. And I think that those really have to be looked at. The increase in personal allowance, just, it's been on hold for years. The government have extended that. I think actually that's the wrong way to go. I think workers should be allowed to reap the rewards of their hard work. Simple as that. So that's where I would start. So.
No, I agree. Especially the 5 years that we've had, and there's the sacrifices that people have made, and how much even small businesses have been affected as well.
Yeah, so employers' national insurance, the increase that was announced in the October budget, everybody, it's only 1.2%. I just said, no, it's not. It's 1.2 percentage points, which is actually about 8% of the original 13.8 up to 15. I think that's an extraordinary move. Now, I understand that the Chancellor had this perhaps theoretical black hole to fix. OBR says there was no black hole, but Chancellor says there was. I understand her painting herself into a corner with no increases on PAYE or employees' national insurance. But here's the issue. That tax is a tax on business, and it's a tax on workers, just the same as she'd increase the basic rate of income tax, for example. And the reason for that is quite simple. Business can't simply absorb a massive increase like that. And we're already seeing the results of that with various retail chains and downsizing. Morrison's cafes are all closing. I've had a coffee at Morrison's cafe once. It was actually really good, so I'm a bit disappointed about that.
Do some really good food as well.
Yeah. So I think that was an understandable move on the Chancellor's part, but at the same time, I don't think it was a particularly wise move. No. And I think that's something that I would have tried to find other ways to fill that tax gap. But luckily, I'm not the Chancellor. So.
I think the thing is on that as well is that they forget that it's the businesses who pay the employees. Without the employers, an employee doesn't exist. So if you squeeze in the employee, you're going to affect the employee in one way or the other anyways.
Yeah, so I mean, and it was a double whammy, if you like, because not only did the employer's rate increase, but the threshold at which it becomes payable decreased by about 50%. And that brought a lot more people onto the books as having to, employers having to make earnings payments. And that seemed to me to be, in some ways, I can understand that. There used to be, especially in the retail trade, nobody was going to get more than 16 hours. So weekend workers, etc., didn't get more shifts even if they wanted them, because the retailer just didn't want to get into that earnings bracket. On the other hand, it does make massive difference to large scale employers, as well as umbrella companies. I mean, the umbrella companies in particular and their workers are going to be massively disadvantaged by this, because of course it has to come out somehow. In an ideal world, the hirer would increase the rates, and the agency would up their assignment rate to the umbrella company. But as you probably have seen on LinkedIn, we know of at least one fairly substantial agency which just wrote out to all its umbrella companies on its PSL saying, no, you have to absorb it. You're not allowed to charge the worker anymore. It can't come out the worker's slice, and we're not paying you anymore. So it makes it very difficult for anybody in that industry to come away with a good feeling. I can put it that way.
That kind of brings me to one of my next questions, really, which is obviously starting next week, we are going to see this increase in the national insurance,
Yeah.
which, as you kind of pointed out, does create challenges for the umbrella and the agencies, and hopefully more agencies will be more pragmatic than the one you just described and we're aware of. Just out of curiosity, is there anything that FCSA does to ensure its members always pay the right rate, or at least make sure that the new rates that they get are going to fall within the umbrella calculation, or do you trust your members based on the
No,
stringent audits than you do?
I mean, it's not a question of trust, it's a question of verification. We always keep our members very well informed of any changes. They probably are already informed anyway, because they're experts in it.
Yeah.
But one of the key checks that we do is to make sure that all the calculations on a payslip are correct, and crucially that national minimum wage is being met.
Yeah.
And we do those checks on an ongoing basis, and we have various tools available to us to enable that. Spot checking your pay slips. We've got VeriPay.
Yeah.
We've got all sorts of nice tools. One of the other things that we do is just to make sure that the CIS rate is accurate. We set a minimum CIS rate for all our members to follow.
Yeah. Kind of falls in with us and how we make the illustrations tools, new calculations available 6 weeks in advance as well. Great. So slightly moving on, obviously we've touched on the spring statement and nothing was mentioned last week about their plans for our sector really. And we'd like a majority, we do expect the details to be in the finance bill. So in your opinion, based on that, one of their most recent publications did indicate they are going for option 3, what do you think the best outcome would be for us in our sector in the finer details?
Okay, so I think if you start from the premise that they are going ahead with a version of option 3, and I think that's a reasonable place to start. I think it would be crucial for our sector and beneficial for, importantly, the workers themselves, that umbrella companies continue to use their own employee reference number. I think I'm going to use the word shattering here, but shattering 600 or so umbrella companies into about 24,000 employment businesses just makes no sense in that regard. It would make the calculation of everything basically harder: national insurance, pension, sick pay, etc. A lot more difficult, and disadvantaged workers. I mean, the worker would be struggling. A worker with multiple contracts, which is not that uncommon, would be struggling to understand what the hell is going on with their now half a dozen separate slips. And I think it's just an unworkable idea. So I think the employer's reference number, staying with the umbrella company, is the least worst option. I think the idea of having 2 employers, one for tax purposes and one for employment rights purposes, is not a great one.
No.
But that's effectively what option 3 is kind of going to do. However, I think the least worst scenario is that the ERN sits with the umbrella. And the other, we've looked into this, as you can imagine, in some depth, and we actually don't think that the shifting of liability from umbrella companies to employment businesses is actually going to achieve that closing of the tax gap, the missing tax that HMRC imagines that it will. Because, frankly, that tax gap arises from bad actors, if you like, the cowboys. We call them payroll pirates.
I do like that terminology you use.
Yeah.
It is
So
hitting the
those
mark,
payroll
though, isn't it?
pirates, yeah, they'll simply put on a different costume, and instead of calling themselves umbrella companies, which they're not, they'll call themselves recruitment businesses, which they're not.
Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure how it's going to achieve the closing of the tax gap that HMRC is after. I think there's better ways of doing it, and FCSA put together a massive report that which I'm not going to bore you with the details of, but we put together that massive report, which kind of shows government where this policy might not achieve what they want, and it points them in what we think is the right direction, which is a licensing regime for umbrella companies. So, so I think option 3 is the option that they're going to go with. That's the stated policy. And we alongside our stakeholders, are working with HMRC and Treasury to try to eke out the details of the policy, which will be basically the legislation itself, which will be in the finance bill. And we think we might have sight of that early summer, at the very earliest. So at the moment, it's very difficult for us to say with hard certainty what's going to be in the finance bill. We just have to kind of take a guess and try to persuade others of maybe a better way forward.
Definitely.
And I think it's interesting what you said about the RTI, because one thing that I struggle to get my head around with is if they do go for, which kind of makes me think, is how would the HMRC even manage that in their RTI system? They'll have to rewrite the way RTI works, in essence, really, for the personal gateways and even the employer's gateway to all work in one singing machine, which we already know HMRC aren't great at doing as it is.
Yeah, I think it's if the ERN goes up to the employment business level, then I think government are creating a lot more work for themselves, and despite the fact that they've announced that they're going to onboard loads more compliance staff, which is not a bad thing necessarily. I just can't see how they can cope with that. As you say, the RTI system would probably need a bit of a rewrite, which is fairly substantial piece of work. You guys are in software, you know how long
It's not easy.
So some business guy has a great idea, and the IT guys go,
Yeah, sounds about right. Definitely.
And how many months have we got to do this?
Yeah, we've all been there. Well, that's one thing that I think that they're being potentially very, very optimistic in the timeline here, and FCSA has pointed that out to them. I think they want it to apply from April 26. I think April 28 is far more sensible objective in that respect, because it will take a lot of time and effort from everybody to put this in place and to get it right. And one thing, although legislation is quite often an iterative process, there's only so many upheavals that business can take in any given time. So, my ask of government is, to think about this. It's impossible just to wave a magic wand and have all the systems and business processes in place in what could amount to less than 6 months, which is unrealistic to say the least.
And the clock is ticking.
At least, in fairness to government, at least they make most measures run from April rather than the 1st of January. Because I remember when I was working for one of the larger banks, we had to implement loads of changes dictated by the European Central Bank, and they always chose the 1st of January, which an overnight drop on the 31st of December is not a good idea.
Wouldn't be a Merry Christmas for anybody, would it? No, definitely not.
No.
No.
I think there was a period of my contracting career. I worked every Christmas Day and every New Year's Day for about 5 years straight. But
Not what you
there
want.
you go.
Not what you want.
That's what you get.
So,
Yeah.
moving on, Chris, with the reclassification of small businesses, which basically allowing more contractors to decide their own IR35 status, I was chatting with a client the other day, and they seem to be expecting probably about 10% of their umbrella base to move back to working via their own PSCs. Is this something that the FCSA would concur with?
I'm not sure it goes high as 10%, but yeah, I'm certain that there will be a drift back to limited company contractors. I still find it hard to use the term PSC because I know it's commonplace usage, but there's no definition for it. But I think that there will be a swing back. I'm not sure it will be as much as 10%, but it could be.
Yeah.
But I think that will, coupled with the NI increase, strangely enough, where I think the end hirer will actually begin to think, well, wait a minute, this is coming out of the rate that I'm paying, so maybe it's time for us to reconsider blanket bans and things like that, and be a bit more diligent in our status determinations. So I think that there will be a bit of an uptick in limited company contracting again. Yeah.
I think that's something that we all would like to see. And then congratulations to Kate Jolly on being made the new chair of the FCSA. What experience does she bring to the table, Chris, with respect to the proposed changes in legislation?
Well, Kate has been on the periphery of I guess you would say government and government policy for quite a long time. Her actual speciality is good governance and
Nice. Good.
if you like, introducing that independence to FCSA's board will be very useful. But she has some major experience in working with government and advocating for various policies. So I think she'll bring a bit of that experience as well as her governance skills to the board. I thought when I first joined FCSA that a board that's independent or I think more independent is probably a better way of putting it, of its members would be a good thing for FCSA and a good thing for the industry as well. But I think it's about 18 months ago, maybe a bit longer, we introduced a new governance regime to FCSA, which ensured that independent directors were always in the majority on the board. And the next obvious step from that was to get a chair with great experience from outside the industry,
Right.
to lead the board.
Excellent.
Makes sense.
Excellent.
So, slightly going a bit outside of some of the questions we've asked. So, obviously, following the financial crash in 2008, I don't think we seem to have had any real times of stability since. And with what's happening currently, it seems like a real stability is a long way away, if at all possible. So, from someone with your experience, what's your thoughts on that? Do you see any stability on the horizon?
Unfortunately, I don't. And the reason that I say that is twofold. Firstly, I think the politicians that we have now, for better or for worse, are all interested in short-term gain, if I can put it that way. So tinkering at problems rather than having the big picture, which might be 5, 10, 15, 20 years ahead. And there is always a temptation to knee-jerk popular demand, if I can put it that way. And I understand that. You're a politician, you're there by dint of being voted for. And it's in the back of your mind, no matter how lofty you might be, there's always that, well, how is this going to affect me and my party winning again at the next election? So that short-term vision has to be countered by a sort of longer term strategy. And I don't think we've seen that from government for many years, to be honest. And interestingly, I wrote an article about this just recently. I'm not sure if it's been published yet, but
We should link it to this. We should link it to this podcast. There you go.
yeah,
Exclusive
if
to
it's
the
been
podcast.
published, if it's been published, then why not? I think there is that short-termism, and there's the short-termism in business as well.
Yeah.
You get hit every financial quarter, especially if you're a traded company. Every time you release a report, it's going to affect your share price. So there's short-termism in industry itself. So the combination of the two doesn't give that big picture strategy that I think is missing. And we seem to have lost the ability as a country, in my view, to look at, what I would call stretch goals. If you take, this is going to be controversial, I'll get slated for this, but if you take the last...
We like controversy, Chris.
The last Prime Minister that seemed to have stretch goals, whether you agreed with them or not, was probably Margaret Thatcher, and she left power 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I just find it really surprising that we haven't had that kind of vision in the UK for a long time. Now, it doesn't have to be a right of centre or left of centre vision, just a vision. And I think we've kind of lost our way at aiming big, if I can put it that way. And the temptation to aim big has probably gone, because to a certain extent, if you try to aim big, people just deride you, because success in this country is completely frowned upon, if you can put it that way. If you're successful at anything, even if whether it be you're a great music star or a great actor or whatever, somebody will come along, quite often a newspaper, won't mention it for people getting sued, but quite often a newspaper, and say, well, do you remember back in 1998 you said this about, or I don't know, full fat milk being better than skim milk, or something equally banal, and they try and drag you down. And I think the same is true at all levels in society, and we tend to we tend to hold up examples of success as being somewhat grubby.
Yeah.
You imagine some of the reaction that the name Richard Branson, for example, might give you, or James Dyson. But let's face it, success is good for everybody at the end of the day. And I struggle to understand why we deride our successful actors, successful politicians, and we seem to hold it in contempt sometimes, and that baffles me. And it does mean that people say, well, actually, I would be better off getting away somewhere where success is recognised as a good thing, as opposed to slightly grubby. But I don't know if that's a very British way of looking at things. I don't know if it happens elsewhere.
I think our press love to build people up just so they can knock them down. We definitely
absolutely
see that with, certainly as Amin's just mentioned, sports people.
Yeah.
But also, Chris, moving on, one point I was going to bring up about politicians is this is Amin's laughing. This is one of my personal gripes.
I'll tell you in a sec.
They all seem to be these career politicians now. They haven't got experience running successful multinational companies, organisations, yet we allow them to run our country. How can we improve the qualifications, the talents of our MPs, but also every time I'm embarrassed watching the spring statement or the budget with the way the politicians behave in the House. They're worse than children in the playground. And I apologise to children in the playground, but I just find it really frustrating because we can't behave like that in business.
And before you answer that, Chris, I've known Stuart for nearly 9 years. And as I promise you, on a monthly basis, this is a pet hate of his that comes
Oh,
up in a car conversation.
just winds me up. Winds me up.
Well, I've got a huge amount of sympathy for that view, Stuart. I think two things have happened. And you said it, the career politician, where I would say until the 60s, 70s, maybe, most politicians had a background in some sort of trade, whether it be medical, whether it be legal. I mean, we got some excellent politicians coming out of the manual trades.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden, I don't know exactly when it started, this idea that you could, whether you went to university or you came up through the shop floor, you could have a career, an actual career in politics. And with the Tories, it was, they would join the Conservative Student Union. They'd be a member of the Young Conservatives. They might go into being a SPAD or a bag carrier for an existing politician, and then eventually they were given the opportunity to run for Parliament. With the Labour intended to be the NUS, and if they went to university, or then a shop steward, perhaps in some similar, and then bag carrier, local councillor, and then elected to Parliament. And there is now very much the rise of the career politician, where people are leaving school, leaving university, with the actual aim of becoming a politician. And I'm not entirely sure that that's a healthy thing, because like Stuart, I kind of think a bit of experience out in the real world is not a bad thing. Now, it used to be that the legal profession was perhaps overrepresented in Parliament, but at least most of those people went through some sort of knowledge gaining, if I can put it that way, some learning of how business works or how the real world works, before they went into Parliament. I'm not sure how to solve that problem. I don't think that introducing minimum age or restricting Parliament to people that have already served at least 10, 15 years in the real big bad world could be achieved. But yeah, I agree with you, Stuart. The career politician has basically undercut and undermined the value of Parliament as a whole, because they have no experience. One thing that counters that, of course, is that I don't know if it's still ongoing, but the civil service used to do placements with industry, and vice versa. So the senior civil servants, or even sort of middle-ranking civil servants, would get to go out and spend a year or two in the real world before coming back to their jobs. And I think that was a good thing. That taught civil servants a little bit about life outside their own profession. Not sure how to counter it. Not sure what can be done about it, but there is a real problem. If one of my children came to me and said, "Dad, I want to be an MP," I said, "Right, well, I think my first response would be, well, what are you going to do first? What do you bring to the table?" And of course, we're speaking in broad generalizations. There are many, many MPs who didn't enter Parliament until, well after they'd had a fairly successful career doing something. And it almost doesn't matter what they do. I think Joe Gormley, great old Liberal politician, great experience, great politician. I think I'm right in saying he started as a minor. So why not have more minors? Not that there's that many minors in the UK now, but why not have more minors running for Parliament? Why not more ambulance drivers? And why not more IT guys? Because that's kind of the way of the future.
Yeah, it is. That's a really good point. So, obviously, with our tokens, we do like to keep them serious and stuff, but we also like to have a bit of a twist at the end, just to make it a bit fun. Because What's life without a bit of fun? So one of the things we always do in these is a fun fact segment, and we heard on the grapevine that you're well travelled, Chris. So my
I,
question,
I,
well,
I
my
don't know who
question to
told you that.
you, what has been your favourite destination and why?
Oh wow, that's a hard one. There has been a few. Um, okay, so I guess the Far East, Hong Kong and Tokyo in particular,
Nice.
were sort of eye-opening journeys for me because just the vibrancy and sort of the overall buzz of those two places quite amazing. New York's a bit the same, although New York possibly takes itself a little bit too seriously now and then.
Really?
Edinburgh, where I'm from, is still absolutely the best city in the world. I have to say that. Any of my Edinburgh pals
Especially
watching
on
this will kill me.
especially on a Six Nations weekend, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. The Welsh and the French, they're the best two. So, because we get on really well with them. So, but yeah, I think the Far East. I think it's a few years since I was last there, but I always, yeah, just completely awestruck by the vibrancy of those two cities.
Maybe we should have a members meeting in Tokyo.
Yeah, I'll see if I can
We'll get
persuade
Debs to arrange it.
Yeah, yeah. But actually, truth be told, nowadays I quite like just shutting down for 2 weeks and sort of lie on the beach and have a beer or two. And I guess my favourite for that. Oh, it's hard to pick a favourite. Maybe Greece. I think it's a very laid back
I like
society,
Greece.
and I really love Puglia, which is sort of the boot of Italy. So I really love that area as well. But yeah, I think the occasional city break. I was in Barcelona in October, just gone, and I had a great time there. So
Brilliant.
As a Real Madrid fan, I'm going to pretend you didn't say that.
I've been to Madrid a few times as
I love
well.
Madrid. Madrid's good.
Yeah, I like Madrid.
Good, good.
But
It's all right.
yeah,
There we
so
go. We're friends again.
I think nowadays I just I don't know if it's old age setting in, but I actually quite like just sitting watching the waves and having a quiet beer and getting very sunburned very quickly.
So thank you for that. But what we're going to do is just a bit of a quick fire, this or that, and you're just going to answer me
Okay,
which one you prefer, right? So, are you an early bird or a night owl?
bit of both, but I have a habit of getting up at stupid o'clock.
So, tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Nice. So, would you rather make calls or would you rather draft an email?
I think nowadays probably email because if it's not in writing, it didn't happen.
Good point.
Would you rather be famous for your work, Chris, or would you rather be super rich but unknown?
Super rich but unknown, definitely, of course.
That's like
But being famous for doing good would be quite nice as well. But
cool.
I'll
So
take the super rich.
fair. So I've got two pills in my hand. One gives you the ability to fly. One gives you the ability to be invisible. Which one would you rather be?
Ooh, I'll take the invisible because I can buy flights. So
Yeah.
Fair. I like that. So last one. Would you rather be able to venture to deep sea or fly to the moon?
no, definitely.
The moon.
There's things in the ocean that can kill you and want to, whereas things in space can kill you. But most of the people sending you into space don't want to kill you.
True.
Brilliant. Well, Chris, that basically brings us to the end of our time here. Really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah,
I've really enjoyed talking to you.
definitely.
And hopefully we will see you. Well, we'll definitely see you at the forum in June, if not beforehand. But as I say,
Yeah, look forward to it.
thank you very much
Thank
indeed
you
for your
so
time,
much,
Chris.
Chris.
And we'll see you soon.
Thank you, guys.
See you
Been a
next
pleasure.
time.
Thank you.
Everyone as well. Bye.
Bye now.
Cheers.
Cheers.